thought I would give you in the evening meetings some biographical information. It's not a full biography of any of these characters, but it's picking out some of the key points that I believe God has put in the life story of these different characters. And we're going to start tonight with Gideon. But we're going to look at important lessons for today. I don't believe that we should study with the idea of just history in mind, but we need to be looking for what is the reason that God has included that story in the Bible. And we have this interesting sentence from the book Education, page 146. As an educator, no part of the Bible is of greater value than are its biographies. That's a pretty powerful statement. If you sum up the entire Bible, there's no information that's better to educate us than those biographies of the Bible characters. And so that we know for sure, we should look for lessons for today. 1 Corinthians 10:11 says, "Now all these things happen unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come." So then, in the story of Gideon, what is the reason for the last days that God put this story in the Bible? We're going to look at that. Just to rehearse some of the details of the most important experience that he had. In Judges chapters 6 and 7, I've picked out some verses. Then all the Midianites and the Amalekites and the children of the east were gathered together and went over and pitched in the valley of Jezreel. Now, if you think about it, there is a huge battle at the end of time called Armageddon. And contrary to what used to be taught, it is a battle between Christ and Satan, and Christ's followers and Satan's followers. And so this is what is going to take place here. A battle between the followers of Satan and the followers of God. But the Spirit of the Lord came upon Gideon, and he blew a trumpet, and Abiezer was gathered after him. The trumpet was a trumpet to call soldiers to join him. And he was moderately successful. In verse 35, it says, "And he sent messengers throughout all Manasseh." Now, Manasseh had been divided in two parts because they were the biggest tribe of Israel. So some of them were on the eastern side of Jordan and some were on the western side. But apparently he sent to all of them, who also was gathered after him, and he sent messengers unto Asher and unto Zebulun and unto Naphtali, and they came up to meet them. So out of these tribes, it wasn't all the tribes, but out of these tribes, he gathered an army to go to war against that huge force. And of course, in the Bible, if you do the math, you know this, but Patriarchs and Prophets says in 548, the entire force under Gideon's command numbered only 32,000 men against hundreds of thousands, no doubt. We see here an inequity. And so Gideon was by now sure that God had called him, but I'm sure he wasn't too confident that he could win the battle with that many, but he was putting his trust in the Lord. In chapter 7, verses 2 and 3, and the Lord said unto Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, mine own hand hath saved me. It's kind of like saying, there are too many Seventh-day Adventists. I cannot win the battle with this many Adventists. In fact, I believe that is one of the lessons that this story brings to us. It should stop our bragging about how many millions of Seventh-day Adventists we have. Because as far as those that he can use in the last days, there's nowhere near that number that can be used in the final battle. But God is going to have to say again, you got too many. I can't win the battle with this many. Now, it should be obvious because we've been in battle for 175 years and we didn't win yet. So something is not right. We got too many soldiers, and he's going to have to make a change. So God said, now, therefore, go to proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And we know something from studying last day events what the final battle is going to be like for God's people. And a lot of Seventh-day Adventists are saying, I hope I die before we get to that situation. I don't want to have to face that. Well, God says it's okay. We can let you go. But he's going to win the battle with those that don't feel that way. Now, to be humble and to realize that we couldn't stand for the right at that time without the help of God, that's different. But you'll notice that he said, if all of these were to go into battle, at the end, when I give them the victory, they would take the victory to themselves. So I can't take these soldiers that would do that, take the glory to themselves. So he has part of the command that was supposed to be given every time they went to war. He has in here the last part, but we're going to look at the full instruction that was given. In Patriarchs and Prophets 5:49, it says, he was filled with astonishment at the declaration that his army was too large. And I suppose there would be a lot of astonishment today if somebody heard this sermon and said, what do you mean we've got too many Seventh-day Adventists? We need every one of them. No, unfortunately, they can't all be used in the finishing of his work. And so maybe some of us would be as astonished as Gideon was when God told him, you have too many. In the book of Deuteronomy, we find what was supposed to be read before each army, before they went into battle. It's found in Deuteronomy 20, verses 5 through 8. What man is there that hath built a new house, and hath not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. Now, when a person reads that, they would probably think, well, isn't God nice to tell people that they don't have to go to war if they've just built a house or something that they want to do. But then when you get down to the story that Jesus told about the supper, and he sent out an invitation for the people to come, and they started saying, well, I've got to go do this and I've got to go do that. It's not complimentary in that story. And Jesus is interpreting this. He's basically saying, if you care more about your own comfort and about your own possessions and so on, if you care more about that than winning the Lord's battle, then I can't use you. You need to go home, because I can only use the people that care more for winning the battle than they do for what they might lose if they go into battle. But that was only the first one. Here's the second one. And what man is he that hath planted a vineyard and hath not yet eaten of it? Let him also go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man eat of it. Now, in the Israelite economy, the vast majority of them were farmers. They had a piece of ground, and they made their living by farming. So here he's talking about occupation. In other words, if that job where you make so much money is more important to you than joining the army and finishing, and maybe you get paid and maybe you don't, if that's more important, then, go ahead, you can keep your job. But I can't win the battle with you. I have to get people that are fully dedicated to the advancement of my cause. Well, by that time, I'm sure quite a few were lost to the cause, but that wasn't the end. And what man is there that hath betrothed a wife, and hath not taken her? Let him go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her. So here we have family. If we could count up all of the people that would have been missionaries if they didn't have to leave their family, wow, we'd have a lot of missionaries. But people don't like to leave their family, even to advance the cause of God. They're not willing. And we have it easy today. The old-time missionaries, when they went overseas, they went for life. They didn't know whether they'd ever get back to see their family or not. And so God is saying, if your family is more important to you, you can go home. I can't win the battle with people that make their family first. Now, that doesn't mean when we're with our family, we shouldn't do everything to help them be saved. But often it's father, mother, it's not the immediate family, it's other family members that people don't want to leave. And then the last one is the one that the story of Gideon mentions. What man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return unto his house, lest his brethren's heart faint as well as his heart. When the battle gets really hard and intense, one single person that gets scared or that, talks negatively about the outcome of the battle, it can turn the tide in the wrong direction. And so God says, I'm sorry, but I can't use them in this army. We can gain the victory, but not with them. They will damage other troops, and so they need to go home. Well, you know what happened in verse 3 of Judges 7. And there returned of the people 20 and 2,000, and there remained 10,000. Now put yourself in Gideon's position. Now, I believe Gideon represents Jesus in this story because Jesus is the captain of the Lord's host. And he's working through Gideon, but he's testifying how he does things in the last days so that we understand who can be a part of the army that's going to finish the work. Or we could put it this way, the kind of people that are going to be able to receive the latter rain. Because it's through the latter rain that we will be able to finish the gospel into all the world. And it won't take another 175 years. It's going to go really, really fast. But what a sad story to think that many Seventh-day Adventists, if you look at the ratio, that many Seventh-day Adventists are going to be sent home and not be able to be a part of the final battle. Patriarchs and Prophets 5:49 explains more details of why God asked Gideon to do the testing. The Lord saw the pride and unbelief existing in the hearts of his people. He's able to read everything that's in there. And even though this 32,000 men had responded to the call, he read in their heart, many of them, that they had pride. They said, we can do it. We can conquer that enemy. Or they were scared. They had unbelief. And they were thinking, wow, I don't know about this. Aroused by the stirring appeals of Gideon, and you know, we have a message when it is preached correctly, it's a stirring message. And it collects a lot of people. Jesus said that the net brought in good and bad. Doesn't bring in just good. Brings in both the good and the bad. And those stirring appeals gave him 32,000. They had readily enlisted, but many were filled with fear when they saw the multitudes of the Midianites. So no doubt as they left home and headed for the collection point, they were full of pride, thinking, yes, we can do it. And then when they got there and they looked down and they saw the enemy, their attitude changed. But many were filled with fear when they saw the multitudes of the Midianites. Yet, had Israel triumphed, those very ones would have taken the glory to themselves instead of ascribing the victory to God. Now, God has to take us by a path to get rid of all self-sufficiency. You might wonder sometimes, why are all these things happening to me? Why do these things that make me look bad or, humble me in the eyes of other people, why do they happen? And sometimes we even rebel against those things. But if we want to be a part of this final army that's going to win, not just keep on fighting. We've been like the Vietnam War. It just kept on fighting, and finally they say, we're getting out. There's no point in keep on fighting. But God says, no, we're going to finish this one. But we can only do it with people that I have been able to deliver from all self-sufficiency. Otherwise, when I give them the victory, they will take the credit for having gotten the victory. Yet, had Israel triumphed, those very ones would have taken the glory to themselves instead of ascribing the victory to God. In verse 4, chapter 7 of Judges, and the Lord said unto Gideon, the people are yet too many. If he was astonished before, what do you think is happening in his heart now? Bring them down unto the water, and I will try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom I say unto thee, this shall go with thee, and of whomsoever I say unto thee, this shall not go with thee, the same shall not go. So in other words, it wasn't by election that the final army was voted in, but it was by God's choice that the final army gets selected. And they get selected based on their character and the victories that they've already gained. So in verse 5 it says, so he brought down the people unto the water. And the Lord said unto Gideon, every one that lappeth of the water with his tongue. Now, notice there is no announcement. Gideon doesn't say, everyone that laps the water with his tongue is, as the dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. God didn't say, we won't take those. Likewise, everyone that boweth down, we will take those. Likewise, everyone that boweth down upon his knees to drink. So, God decides to divide this 10,000 men into two groups based upon how they drank their water. And some of them they were thinking, wow, I don't know when we're going to get water the next time. I better really get all I can hold so that I have enough. The other group said, we got to get at that empty as fast as we can get there. And they just grabbed up enough water to be on their way. Verses 6 and 7, and the number of them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, were 300 men. But all the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink water. What a simple test that God set. But it revealed character. It revealed that all but the 300 were more interested in themselves than in the battle. And the Lord said unto Gideon, by the 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thine hand. And let all the other people go, every man unto his place. So all of the rest of that 10,000 were sent home. And God was going to win the victory with 300. Now we know that there's a very special group in the last days, 144,000. And God can win the battle he can do it with many, but he can do it with few as well. In fact, one of the most outstanding stories in the Bible, I believe, is the story of Jonathan and his armor bearer. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, let's go up, just two of us, against the whole Philistine host. And he told him, he said, God isn't bound by how many he has. What he needs is people that are totally dedicated to the mission. And those are the ones he can use. Again, from Patriarchs and Prophets 549. By the simplest means, character is often tested. Now, here's a very important point. Right now, we are developing character. And if we're not careful, we don't realize the importance of developing that character right now. We can't wait till the test comes. Because if we do, we know we will not have the kind of character that will be in the 300. We just won't, because naturally we're going to fall in the other group, one of those other groups. But if we are willing, presently and from now until God applies those tests, if we are involved in developing character and welcoming all the things that will help us to develop our character, and recognizing those things that would put us in one of those categories so that we can get rid of them, then when the test comes, we can be among the 300. By the simplest means, character is often tested. Those who in time of peril were intent upon supplying their own wants were not the men to be trusted in an emergency. The Lord has no place in his work for the, and it gives two words here, indolent and self-indulgent. So if we don't like to work hard for the Lord, we won't be in that final army. If we don't like to do without some things, people argue, well, God wants me to have these things. Well, it's okay if it's not wartime, but you may not get it all in wartime. And we have to be willing to not have it. The men of his choice were the few who would not permit their own wants to delay them in the discharge of duty. And so they just reached their hand down, got some water, maybe several times as they went through, and they were ready to go. And the others, they just, bowed down and drank all they could hold. The 300 chosen men not only possessed courage, so they were not afraid, but the reason they were not afraid is that God said they could have the victory. It's not that they were not afraid of their own inability, of their own weakness. They were afraid of that, but they were trusting in God that he could gain the victory. Not only did they possess courage, but also self-control. But they were men of faith. That's why they had become people of self-control. That's why they had courage. They had not defiled themselves with idolatry. God could direct them, and through them, he could work deliverance for Israel. Why? Because success does not depend upon numbers. The Old Testament's very clear. If he can do it with 2, he can do it with any number. And this time he did it with 300. God can deliver by few as well as by many. He is honored not so much by the great numbers as by the character of those who serve him. So God is not impressed with how many people are Seventh-day Adventists. What he is interested in is how many have my character. How many have been willing to let me, through all of the experiences of life, take out the things that don't belong and put my character in them. And that whenever they see anything that's not representative of me, that they seek me to take it away and get rid of it so that they can have my character more and more. So in closing, we just review some of the key points. The 4 tests that God will apply to us, and He has probably been applying these already to people. The first one is that He asks us to give up certain possessions, or at least not to consider them so important that we can't go to work for Him in some part of the vineyard. Possessions often keep people back from being willing to serve Him. Either possessions they already have or possessions they would like to get. And they see that, well, if I go to work for God, then I won't be able to get those things that I would like to have. So possessions can be a real hindrance, but it takes us out of the army if we refuse. The final army, anyway. Number 2, the occupation. The Bible is clear that in the last days, people will be called from the plow. It's kind of like saying, God calls people from a lucrative career where they will make lots of money and have lots of possessions, and He calls them out of that and He puts them in His service where they may not get much and they don't know what they're going to get. That is part of the test that we have to pass if we want to be a part of that final battle. The third test was family. And as you read stories about the persecution of the Dark Ages, you find that some people turned back because their wife or their husband wanted them to turn back. Jesus was very clear that while it is appropriate to, foster good family relationships, there are times that God calls us to recognize that His work is more important, and that can be a test for the final soldiers. And the fourth one is that anybody that was afraid was let go home. And so God can only use those that are strong in faith. How do we get strong in faith? By having to trust Him in all kinds of circumstances over and over again. I thank the Lord for being called at a young age into this type of work where it didn't look possible to survive financially. But we are still here, still in it, after almost 50 years. And that, to me, proves that God was able to do it. We never had to leave because of finances or any other reasons. And it's done a lot for the development of our faith. Now, here are the qualities in this story that we need. Number 1, to become more interested in God's work than what we want. Sometimes He asks us to do a job we don't particularly want to do, or to go somewhere where we don't want to go, or whatever. But if we make His work the most important, then He can use us in the final hour. Second, we must be willing for hardship and trial. Along the way, you may do without, you may have problems, difficulties, and so on, but that's the kind of person He needs for that 300. Also, we need to be courageous, not in what we can do, but in what He can do. If it's His work that we're involved in, if it's our work, yeah, we have a reason to be scared. But if it's His work, then we can be courageous because He is the finisher of what He starts. And if something stops that he started, he has a reason for it. But generally speaking, he finishes what he starts. Number 4, they had to be self-controlled. In other words, conquering all addictions. Probably everybody has to battle with one addiction or another. Some have food, that's an addiction. Some have work, that's an addiction. Some have, can be anything. Cell phone's a big one for the young people today. But whatever the addiction is, we have to conquer it by His power so that we become self-controlled. Number 5, we need to be full of faith, because that's one of those things that He can put in us, and it gets strengthened by exercise, just like our muscles. Another one is, number 6, is He picks people that are not following the ways of the world. Now, I don't know that it has to be that they never followed the ways of the world, but that they gave them up if they did follow them, that they gave them up. And they corrected, and that's what the Heavenly Lifestyle Seminar is all about, talking about some of the ways that we need to stop following the world, and we need to follow what He said in the Bible or the writings of Ellen White. If we follow only what He said, then we won't be following any of the ways of the world. And last, they would not take the credit for the victory. In other words, if they have a success, maybe giving a Bible study, maybe giving a sermon, maybe treating a sick person, or building a building, it can be anything, and they don't take any of the credit for themselves. They recognize that they could not have accomplished that without God's working in their situation and guiding them and helping them to succeed. That's the kind of people that Gideon was given by God to go into battle with. And you know the answer. They had total victory. In fact, the enemy panicked and took off because God was with these 300 men. And this is going to be repeated in the final battle between the followers of Satan and the followers of Jesus. But right now, we're in the preparation period. And, he never says to anyone, you can't be a Seventh-day Adventist. He welcomes everybody. You can be an Adventist. Come, join us. But in the process, He is working to get those who will accept what He's doing so that they can be a part of that final outpouring of the Holy Spirit and finishing of the work. And this is telling us what kind of people they have to be. So the issue is, are you like that? Well, if you're not, fortunately there's still time for the preparation. But you have to get serious, because I don't think we have a lot more time to get ready and become that kind of individual. And He won't give the exact same form of the test that He gave to them. No, but He has His simple ways of testing people. And when the testing is over, that's who will be left to finish the work. He wants you to be a part of that army, but the choice ends up with you as to whether you will endure all of the things that He does to get you ready so you can be a part of it. May God help us, many of us here tonight, to be able to be a part of that finishing work.